All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. And did we just, well, we might have lost him again, but thank you for coming, everybody. We have with us today two candidates for state representative in District 18. We have Nancy Gutierrez and we have Chris Mathis, who I think is having some technical trouble. He's kind of popping in and out. So hopefully he'll be back in a second. We invited Linda Evans, who Gutierrez and Mathis are both Democratic candidates. We invited the Republican candidate, Linda Evans, and there's been some mishap, I guess, that she's not going to be joining us today. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the audience, so to speak. You guys will all be on mute, but you can ask questions of the candidates through the chat. So you just write them, and then Sarah will have them feed them to us. And since we only have two people, that logistically is easier for us. We've done several of these today with individuals, and it takes like 15-20 minutes for them. So I'm assuming this will be roughly double that. So what I'll do is I'm going to ask the candidates to kind of just tell us a little bit about themselves. And then I have some, key issues that I'll ask them about, and then we'll start filtering in the questions from the audience. So Nancy, you are you're the one here. So could you please just tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for doing this and having me. My name is Nancy Gutierrez, and I am a Democrat running for LD 18 House of Representatives, and I'm a teacher at Tucson High. And I have my husband, I'm married to my husband, Andy. We've been married for 26 and a half years. The halves count, so I say them. I have two daughters. One graduated, Megan graduated from U of A in December, and I literally just got back a half an hour ago from taking Macy and getting her settled in her NAU dorm. So that's one of the reasons I decided to run, was because I've been a teacher in Arizona since 1994. And I've taught everything from preschool and first and second grade to now high school. And when we were stationed in Watertown, New York, my husband was in the military, and I taught statistics and math classes at a community college. So I've taught in lots of venues, and I want to help save public education, because it has been systematically destroyed in Arizona. And I've watched that. And after being a department chair at Tucson High and working with the Red for Ed movement and with my teachers union, I realized that the help would have to come from the state legislature. And so I believe that we need more teachers in the state legislature to really allow people to understand what really goes on in the classroom. How long do I have, Kurt? Do you want me to go on my whole spiel?
Oh, no, don't do the whole spiel. Yeah,
okay.
No, yeah.
Okay.
We'll
right.
do issues, stuff like that.
Okay.
I want to ask you,
stop.
How long have you lived in the district?
We moved here in 2007.
Okay. All right. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Chris Mathis, just could you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you're into?
All right. Thank you very much, Kurt. And thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So I am Chris Mathis. I am a current member of the legislature. I was appointed to the seat that Randy Freeze stepped down from in LD9 in December of 2021. So I was in legislature for this full session from January to the end of June. I'm a lawyer by training. I've also done some legislative work. I worked in Washington, D.C. in the House, the United States House, and also in the United States Senate. I was a healthcare legislative assistant in the Senate to a senator from Nebraska at that time, Chuck Hagel. I was his healthcare legislative assistant. I've also worked a little bit back where my wife and I are originally from, in Illinois. Kurt, we moved to Tucson in 2001. We've been in this current location since 2003. Worked in General Assembly there, and also did some other legislative work in England and Parliament. So I've been interested in this stuff for a while. I have practiced law in Tucson since coming here in the early 2000s. I practiced elder law and estate planning because of my legal work and also the legislative work that I did in Washington. I've developed an interest in healthcare policy. A couple of years ago, I went back to school and got a couple of master's degrees, one in public administration and one in healthcare policy. And I currently teach a couple of courses at the U of A College of Law, one in healthcare law and policy and one in aging. So that's a summary.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so Nancy, you were talking about education, and we have one of the bigger things that's happened this year in terms of education in Arizona is the expansion of the voucher program. And I wanted to get what are your thoughts on that, and do you have any remedies for schools in Arizona?
Sure, thank you. Well, I'm hoping that we can stop this new voucher expansion. I am one of the teachers that is circulating a petition to get the new vouchers on the 2024 ballot. As we all know, Arizonans have continually voted down vouchers. People of Arizona don't want expanded vouchers, and this will take $1 billion away from our current budget, which I'll tell you something, Kurt, we've been teaching now this is the 4th week, and each week I've had about half of the week with no air conditioning in my classroom, no windows, and I teach yoga. So we do a physical practice, and it has been very hot. So I can't imagine what the state of our schools will be with even less money in our budget. It's been a long time that our schools have gotten no maintenance and operation budgets. Our budgets go strictly to people and education, not to the maintenance of our structures. And Tucson High is the oldest high school in Southern Arizona. And so we have some maintenance needs. As solutions, I would say restoring our budget to what it should be. We need to stop the flat tax, to be honest. The flat tax is going to take even more money away from our schools. And, we are not even funded at a 2008 level right now, and it's 2022. So we definitely need more money. And that's not just for money's sake. I have often said that I've spent my campaign money like a teacher. Everything has to make sense, and everything is very, not over the top. So it's not just about spending more and that will solve all the problems. But in this case, if we don't have the budget to even get us air conditioning, it's pretty hard to teach, 30 high schoolers yoga when I'm sick to my stomach because it's so hot in the room. So it's a dire problem. And we just have to get those signatures to put the vouchers on the ballot. And I know that the voters of Arizona will stop it.
Hey, Chris, so what do you think of the voucher expansion, and what would you do to fix the schools in Arizona?
Well, I sign on to everything that Nancy said, and I think it's great to have a nominee who is currently teaching, and I think she'll be great in the legislature. Of all of the things that kind of came across our desk in the legislature this year, this was many of which were frustrating. This was one of the most frustrating because I think as everybody on the call probably knows, this question was asked and answered a few years ago in Arizona. Ballot measure, do we want to expand and have universal vouchers? And the answer was no, and it was resounding no. And so, but at the end of a session in June, the majority was able to pass this on a party line vote. And I think that, as Nancy was saying, that the Save Our Schools initiative is going to be the best way to deal with it. And I'm hopeful that will be successful, just as it was at least the same question a couple of years ago. So I just think that the notion that we would be allowing basically everybody in the state to have access to vouchers for private education is nuts. And I don't, and also, of course, at the same time, it is funneling a tremendous amount of money away from public education, because that is really talking about two separate things here. And that is, but it's all connected. So So I sign on to everything that she says. I think we can try to, in the legislature, do what we can to change it, to get it repealed. But I think the ballot initiative is going to be our best bet.
Mhm. Okay. So oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I do have petition. So if anybody would like to sign, you can put your name in the chat and I can contact you, because we do have a couple more weeks for that. And it would stop the current vouchers and put it on the ballot. So they would not come into effect this year. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
And as a side note, tomorrow's paper in the opinion section will have a local guest opinion that has information on where to sign.
Oh, great.
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 Yeah. Also, we have, for the first time in 50 years, state legislatures are going to be able to pass essentially whatever law they see fit regarding abortion, right, after Roe v. Wade was overturned. So if you are elected, what kind of laws would you like to see related to abortion?
Who do you want to go first?
Oh, I'm sorry, Nancy, please go. Yeah,
okay. I didn't want to just jump in. Well, I think that that Roe v. Wade did a great job of spelling out abortion rights. I absolutely believe that abortion is healthcare, and I think the ramifications of it were exactly the way they should be. I know that right now we're waiting for a decision in Arizona with the Pima County attorney and went to the judge to decide which of the laws, the current laws in Arizona, are going to guide abortion. And they're both terrible. A 15-week abortion ban does not give people who are pregnant the amount of time to even sometimes know that they're pregnant. And I don't think that women should have to prove that they were raped or were a victim of incest to have an abortion. I think that is up to a person who is pregnant and their doctor to decide. So I would say we need to, I would put legislation up that would be exactly what the Roe v. Wade guidelines were.
Okay. And Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think we need to essentially codify Roe versus Wade, both on the state level and on the federal level. And this was a right that folks in the United States had for 50 years. And if you read the Roe decision, it is actually very well reasoned and well laid out. And it served, I think, our country well for 50 years. And it's just, as a lawyer, it is hard to understand how a majority of the Supreme Court was able to just wipe away a fundamental right that people had, again, for half of the century. So I think what we can do in the legislature is try to pass a law to codify Roe, but also try to do specific repeals of, for instance, the 15-week ban, which was passed this last time. I think, given, just as I was discussing before with the voucher legislation, I think our best bet is likely going to be an initiative in 2024. And I think if you look at, for instance, what happened in Kansas, it's a slightly different question, but I think it was basically the same question. You saw really an overwhelm. I just had to finish the official count, I guess, there a couple of days ago, which was exactly the same as the initial count. And there was an overwhelming response on that question. And so I think that we may well have that same, I hope we have that same situation in Arizona when it comes to the ballot. Until then, we'll do everything in the legislature that we can to fight it and to get these rights back.
So this is a kind of little follow-up. What I've been asking all the candidates is, rather than, Nancy, I think you kind of addressed this, but rather than have it be focused, the debate is, Democrats want you to be able to abort the baby, a full term, and Republicans, even if it threatens the woman's her life, you shouldn't be able to do it. And I think that the reality of it is much closer in the middle there, that there's a lot of women who are having an abortion, and they're already mothers, and it's just a choice they're making. So what I was asking the candidates is, if there is a 25-year-old woman who gets pregnant and wants to get an abortion for no other reason than she just doesn't want to be pregnant right now, doesn't want to have a baby, do you think that that should be legal? Like, Chris, do you think that should be legal? I'm sorry.
I definitely think that should be legal, and that has been legal for 50 years in the United States.
Okay. And Nancy?
I totally agree. I just don't think that anybody, that our government should be able to tell a woman what they do with their body. And I do kind of resent when people on the more extreme say, you know, women want full-term abortions, because there is no such thing as a full-term abortion. I mean, that's birth. You know, Roe gave 23 weeks, 26 weeks. Now it's going out of my head, but there was it's the viability of the fetus, right? So there are not, that was the law of the land. So abortions were not happening after that, unless it truly was the life of the mother. No one was having an abortion by choice just because, you know, they're 6 months pregnant and all of a sudden they're like, I changed my mind. So you know, but we do hear those arguments. Well, what about, you know, abortions in the third trimester? I mean, that's not what we're arguing. That's not what happens, except in extreme cases where the mother would die. So, and I don't think anyone is arguing even for that. We're arguing that before the fetus is viable, meaning could not live outside of the mother's body, it's the mother's body. So.
Okay. All right, change the topics a little bit. Another big issue that we are all facing is water. All right, so we have the Colorado River is low, Lake Mead, Lake Powell, it's low. You know, the states are trying to figure out what to do. Starting with you, Chris, what do you think the legislature should do so that we, you know, have enough water?
Well, I think we actually, we've been talking about contentious issues so far. Water is one that is a difficult issue, but it's less contentious in a partisan way at the legislature. We have sort of maybe they're kind of rural concerns and urban concerns, but it tends to be one that is handled in more of a bipartisan way. At the end of last session, because of the situation that we were in, where for the first time since Jan Napolitano was governor, we had a bipartisan budget, we were able to, and I was involved a bit in this as a member of the NREW committee, the Natural Resources, Energy and Water Committee in the House, pass a bill that appropriated quite a bit of funding to trying to supplement our water in Arizona and trying to conserve our water in Arizona. I think if folks on our side of the aisle had been able to write the bill, there would have been more funding for conserving and probably less funding for the supplementation or augmentation. But in any case, we were able to get $1.4 billion for that. And I think that what that does is it puts the state of Arizona, and I was just reading an article over the weekend, and there have been so many good articles in the Daily Star and elsewhere on this topic. We are in a situation, in addition to all of the rest of it with Lake Mead and Lake Powell and 1,000-year drought, 20-year drought. We are in a situation where we're going to be we need to be negotiating state to state. And so I think that legislation that was passed at the end of June puts us in a stronger position to do that. One of the cans, though, that was kicked down the road, because it is a contentious issue in the state, especially with agricultural interests, is the way that we treat groundwater in Arizona. And we do not regulate it well, and we need to regulate it more. And so how we do that, I think, is something that I'm hoping, if I'm able to be back, that is something that we'll be able to tackle in the next session on the NREW committee, because that's a key piece that we didn't deal with. But so those are my thoughts.
Okay. Nancy?
I completely agree with Chris, and he has a lot of knowledge on this after sitting on that committee. So I'll just add a little bit. The first thing I wrote down was groundwater. we have to regulate it throughout the whole state, not just Pima and Maricopa County. And then I would also say that we should not be selling our water to outside entities. We do not have enough water for our state, so we certainly shouldn't be selling water to foreign countries. I was appalled at that. And I agree with what Chris said, that I would have liked more money for the conservation and education on how to save groundwater. And Pima County, we do a great job here of that, but I don't think that's true for our entire state. And I think that when most citizens really understand the drought and the issues that we do have, and that it is dire, they will want to, I mean, my goodness, how much rain could we have harvested during these monsoon weeks? We've had incredible monsoons, almost too much water with the flooding in the foothills and the Riito, but you know, I sure wish I had more rain barrels out during these past few weeks just to do my part. But yes, I agree with everything Chris said, and would emphasize groundwater, certainly.
Okay, all right. So we also have the border, right? So the Arizona state government is kind of following the footsteps of the Texas government, where they're trying to have the state play a bigger role in border enforcement than previously. Let's go with Chris again to start. What do you think the state's role should be with regard to the border?
Well, it's a federal issue. So any state role is extremely limited. And that is just sort of this kind of the deal, full stop. We in the budget in legislature this past session, we saw, and then prior to that, we would see various attempts by the majority to add provisions that relate to the border. And I think they were successful in getting some of those in there. But at the end of the day, it is just a federal issue. And so the discussion of it on the state level, I think, at least my take is that it's been in the past 10 years or so, really there more for political reasons and for sort of base intensity generation than any sort of actual solution seeking. As I say, it is at its core a federal issue, not a state issue.
Okay, Nancy.
I agree, and I think that Texas is grandstanding, and Governor Ducey's, you know, shipping containers on top of each other that I'm told are already falling over. It's just an incredible waste of our state's money. I think that we could put money into deciding how we want to treat and handle and represent the immigrants and asylum seekers that do come over. I think putting them on buses and sending them to DC is not the way to do it, and it doesn't help anyone. I think that, you know, overall we can create better ways and more streamlined ways for dealing with and in processing asylum seekers that is legal to come into the country as an asylum seeker. And you know, many of our families had immigrants come into this country as asylum seekers. So I think our efforts are better spent doing that than grandstanding and wasting millions and millions on these stunts that really don't put us any further into a solution for these problems.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to give you guys a question from a reader. All right. So let's start with Nancy this time. Name a bill passed and adopted in a recent legislative session that you would vote to repeal, and tell us why.
I saw that in the chat, so I cheated a little bit, but I have so many. The 15-week abortion ban, I don't think that's a good law. The flat tax, I don't think that's going to be good for our state. The vouchers. And then before they voted in the vouchers, I was actually in the gallery that day. Before they did that, they actually decided to make no, and when I say they, I mean the Republicans, not Chris. But they pulled all of the checks and balances for that voucher money. So basically, people will get this $7,000 and not have to show a receipt on where they actually spent it. There are no testing requirements for these vouchers. So there is no way that we'll have data to say, hey, these students actually did get a better education in these private and charter schools. They took that away. And I think that is very much a miscarriage of our funds, to take them from public schools, give them to private schools, and then literally have no accountability whatsoever. So those are just a few of the laws that I would want to appeal.
Okay. And Chris?
Yeah, that's more in the nature of an essay answer, I think.
Sure.
So I would sign on to all of those strongly that Nancy mentioned. One of the things that, my other committee assignment this past term was on the Judiciary Committee, and so we would see a lot of bills on hot button issues. And one of the things that I was most disappointed with was that Governor Ducey signed. It's not a surprise, but since some folks in other states, Republican governors in other states, hadn't signed this stuff, there were a couple bills that were just basically, from my viewpoint, and I think the viewpoint of others, just picking on trans kid bills. And we saw those bills come through Judiciary, and had really some extraordinary testimony by young people, extraordinarily moving, and I thought very persuasive. Yet the numbers are the numbers in the committee, and the bill advanced and was passed by the legislature and then signed into law by the governor. But I think of all of them, to add to the ones that Nancy mentioned, I think it's this sort of type of legislation that, again, I think is really ultimately there to generate base intensity on the other side, but just essentially picking on kids, and that I think is really problematic that we're doing.
Okay. And so we had another question, which is one I love asking, is the state of Arizona has several $1 billion in surplus over the next couple of years. So that's a big chunk of money, and you all would be in charge of spending it. So how would you spend it? And I was trying to do starting with 2 and 2. And I think Chris, I think this will be your second. So if you can start, how would you spend the money?
Okay. Sure. Well, I think that we made a good start in the legislature this time around with respect to public education funding. I would spend, as Nancy was mentioning earlier, and I think as was at least alluded to, we are, even with the spending that was done in June, and I haven't seen the specific stats, but I think we are still certainly near the bottom, if not at the bottom, at both teacher pay and just public education spending. And so I would spend the bulk of that surplus money on public education, K through 12, whatever else it would make sense, would be appropriate to spend on higher public education as well. I just think that to be in a situation in Arizona where we have the growth that we're having, we have the vast resources that we have to be essentially last, or sort of a little better than last in public education spending, is nuts. And it's short-sighted, and it's hurting our kids, it's hurting our economy. That is what I would spend the bulk of those funds on.
Okay, Nancy.
Me too. I actually wrote an op-ed that you all published a couple of months ago about this surplus. And so education would be a #1 priority, certainly putting into those maintenance and operation budgets that have been ignored for a decade. I also, in the op-ed, I talked about school buses that have air conditioning and seat belts, because we are behind on that as well. Also, I think water, I know that they did do that. They put some of that surplus money in water, which was greatly needed. And I think if we could add to the education, but get the budget up to where we're, in the middle part of the states, I would add in pre-K and preschool to our K-12, because we know it's studied greatly that if we get kids into school even a little bit earlier, it not only helps their education, but it helps their health. And I was also pleased to see this year that they did spend some of that surplus money in extending KidCo, and they extended the length that moms can get after they get a year now of postpartum care, which was wonderful. So I would extend it for those programs that help our families and especially our young families. That's well needed.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I have a little technical thing, sorry. Okay, here we go. Okay, great. And so we are in a position right now in 2022 where we have a lot of people who are saying that 2020 election was stolen. Arizona has kind of become the flagship, in a way, state for this in the country. And as a result of that, there have been numerous bills proposed in legislature in Arizona and elsewhere that would restrict, change voting laws. Let's start with you, Nancy, here. What do you think about the claim that the election was stolen? And what do you think the state legislature should do with regard to voting laws?
Okay. Our election certainly was not stolen. We've done lots of audits. We've had no proof of that. Joe Biden won the presidency by quite a bit, and it was not stolen. So what I think the legislators should do is bring back the permanent early voting list instead of the one that we have now, the AEBL, because there was no fraud in that. And we know that Arizonans really appreciate the ability to be on that permanent early voting list. And so I would want to continue that. And continue I think voting should be convenient. I don't agree with we all vote on the same day. I don't agree with any type of restricting voters. And actually, I would go a step further. And I think that it would be a great idea to have voting registration in the senior high school class where seniors have to take government. And I think it'd be wonderful. At Tucson High, we're having a couple days of voter registration on campus. But I think that requiring, not necessarily requiring, but having that as an option right in the classrooms is wonderful. Because I think the more young people we can get involved in voting, the better off we are. That's what democracy is all about, is being able to vote. So yes, voting should be convenient, and our election certainly was not stolen.
Okay, Chris?
Gosh, I completely agree with that. As far as the election being stolen or fraud or any of that, I mean, it's just absolute baloney, and it has been proven to be absolute baloney, multiple times, and specifically here in Arizona, there was just, I think it was speaking of another newspaper, I think about a week ago, there was a great long form piece in the Sunday New York Times magazine about some of the efforts over the past number of years in Arizona to foster this environment of mistrust in elections. And it's kind of facts be damned. And that's where we are. Again, I think it is largely something that has been done for political effect, and I think it's something that has a lot to do with the person who lost the last presidential election and trying to sort of design an entire system around somehow proving that the results of the last presidential election didn't happen the way that they happened. And I just think that in the United States of America, we need to be making voting as easy as possible. And we need to be doing that in Arizona. So anything that we can do to make it easier, more convenient, of course, with appropriate safeguards. We just had, I think, the canvass, the Secretary of State just approved the canvass for the primary election a couple of days ago. And we saw actually some really encouraging results, despite the fact that mail-in voting has just been criticized relentlessly for the past couple of years, I think there was still, at least in Maricopa County, I think I just saw something this morning, where still something like 83% of Republicans voted mail-in ballots. We have a system in Arizona that Nancy was referencing earlier that's a model for the nation as far as mail-in voting. And it has been something that since the 1990s, when we first implemented it, has been beneficial to all political parties, but certainly to Republicans. And so in any case, so we need to be making voting easier, not harder.
Okay. All right, and then I'm just going to give you another big topic here. We have mass shootings, and it's many. I don't want to get into it, but we all know like there's a lot of mass shootings. And it's very terrible. I'll start with you, Chris. What would you do in the state legislature to ward off mass shootings? Just address gun safety. What kind of bills would you want to see?
Well, I think this is another issue that is tremendously frustrating, and the reality, at least that I've been able to discern in the legislature at this point in time, as I was saying earlier, serving on the Judiciary Committee, you really would see a lot of these kinds of issues. We would see gun issues in judiciary, and my take was that the members of the majority party right now, the Republicans, just are not. They don't feel, whatever their beliefs are, they don't feel that they're politically able to vote against any of these bills that are designed to just kind of make it easier and easier to take guns into public spaces, et cetera. And that is the political dynamic that we have right now. I think what we can do as Democrats in the legislature is to fight these bills, to fight the bad bills, to propose good bills, and there are so many of them. Assault weapons ban, background checks, many more. And I think, I know Nancy and I are both gun sense candidates. It's something that we, I think, in Tucson have a particular sympathy to because of what happened here. I think that it also may be something that maybe would also be some of these measures take the form of a ballot initiative in order to get around some of the lethargy on the majority side in the legislature. But there are a handful of common sense gun safety reforms that could be passed. And again, we were talking about polling a little bit earlier, and just, I think, on the reproductive rights issue, these measures you see consistently nationally poll at something like 90%, and even a majority of Republicans are often supportive of them. So those are the kinds of measures that we need to be proposing, whether it's in the legislature or on the ballot.
Nancy?
I agree. I agree with everything Chris said, and we both are gun sense candidates, and I'm endorsed by Everytown for Gun Safety, and I've been working with Moms Demand Action here in Tucson for a number of years, and it's because of them, the Democrats in our legislature, and some of the Republicans that were willing to listen to them, that many really bad gun bills did not pass. Bills like it would have been okay to have loaded weapons on a school campus parking lot, or I mean, there were a lot of really scary bills, open carry on college campuses. I think that some of the simple things we can do is have legislation to close loopholes, like in private sales and at gun shows. You should not be able to just get a gun at a gun show because there's no background check, there's no waiting period, there's no mental health guarding there. So we could easily implement that. I think that the message always is they want to take our guns, and that's not the reality. So I think as Democrats, we have to do a better job at explaining that that's not the idea, and this is gun sense legislation. So it's keeping the guns safe. It's keeping the guns out of hands of people who are mentally unstable or buying a gun on a whim. because as a teacher, I deal with this every single day. And I have to tell you that my students ask me about it. We haven't had a lockdown drill yet, but we will any day now. And it is scary. And at Tucson High, we had an incident last year. It was not involving guns, but it was still scary to be locked down and have police come onto our campus. And truly, when the announcements come on at an unusual time, it always makes me pause and think, is this the time that I'm going to have to protect these kids from someone with a gun on campus? And I tell you, that's not a way to grow up, and it's not a way to teach. So we need gun sense legislation.
So we have the legislature right now is pretty evenly divided, and who knows the future, but it's possible that the Democratic Party could be the majority, next year. And as we're all aware of this, right? I mean, there's not a lot of, there's a huge political divide in the country. And you see it at the federal level. A lot of these, we have seen some bipartisan bills, but a lot of it is, trying to use legislative techniques so you can just do it with your own simple majority. If the Democrats do take over, if you end up with a 1 or 2 seat majority, what would you do? How would you, with relation to the Republicans, what would be your effort to go across the aisle? Would you try, or what would be your attitude towards that? And I think we'll start with Nancy again here.
Sure. Well, I think when you are an elected official, this is my opinion. If I am elected to represent LD 18, that means I'm representing the whole district. And it is my responsibility to work with everyone I can possibly work with in the legislature. I fully believe that. I really don't think that it serves either party, any one community, to have an all or nothing situation. It's not successful. So I think it's important for all of us to build relationships once we get there, which is what I do with my high school students and their parents every year, and build on those relationships so we can actually listen to each other instead of it having it's become some kind of political game. I'm not there to play games. I'm there to do what's best for our community. And I do think that we need all voices represented. I don't think we get the best legislation when it's just an all or nothing. So we've been asked this on the campaign trail since the very beginning. And I've always said that it will be important to work with everyone. Do you think the same way as everyone? No. Do you get along with them? No. Will you be friends with them? No, not necessarily. But our job is to go there and produce policy that will serve everyone. So I'm looking forward to having those conversations and trying to build those bridges so that we represent more of Arizona than I think we have been.
And Chris?
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. I'd sign on all of that. I think that a couple things. So these are, at the end of the day, the role of legislator in the House and the Senate. These are constitutional roles, and we have partisan affiliations, and that's how the elections work. But our job is to represent the district, and whatever the skew in the district, there are still going to be a significant amount of folks who don't have the same party registration as you do, and your job is to represent everybody in the district. That's the idea, and that is that's the system that we have. And so what I found has been useful in the legislature is to try to build relationships. And something I was pleasantly surprised with, because I wasn't quite sure what to expect, is that it actually is, I know people think, geez, how is this possible? But it actually isn't. It is a fairly pleasant work environment. And most of the folks on the majority side, just like most of the folks on our side, all the folks on our side in our case, are pleasant people to deal with. And we've been talking so far, and it's appropriate because that's where we're talking about the issues on the margins, and and where we have the most differences. But I would say that I'm not sure what this statistic percentage is, but I think it's something like maybe 70% of the bills that pass in the legislature are either bipartisan or unanimous. So there are still a lot of things that we're doing that are just old fashioned. You talk to a constituent, they have a good idea, you bring that idea to legislative council, they draft a bill, and you run the bill, and hopefully it passes. So there's still that kind of thing. There are all kinds of just process improvement things. We actually in Arizona have a really excellent agency review process that the Auditor General is involved with. And so when you're there and doing the work day to day, you're not sort of engaging on these hot button issues that we've been talking about appropriately most of the time. You're really sort of trying to find agreement. And I think that's our job. I think also that it is true that on these issues that we've been talking about, and there are certainly others, the country is divided. But I think on most issues, and I think we've seen this in the polling in Arizona, just in the past few months, there was a new round of polling done, that there is really pretty broad agreement on a lot of perhaps most issues. And it's not just, it's broad, Democrat to Republican, and just broad across the population. Really high majorities wanting certain things, a lot of the things we've been talking about. So I think there are possibilities. I hope that we on the Democratic side are in the majority, maybe not I hope at this next cycle, but perhaps more realistically, a couple cycles into this redistricting cycle. But I think we need to work with the Republicans if they are in the minority in a way that's productive for our districts and for the state.
So I have I'm going to kind of paraphrase a question from a reader a little bit here, having to do with the youth and the elderly. The way our political system is built, or the way it operates, is the youth can't vote, and the elderly are some of the most reliable voters around. And so it does kind of, I think, create an imbalance where if you are all trying to get elected to an office, you need to have votes, and the most reliable people are on the older side. I just want to kind of ask, what about the young people, and not through the eyes of like their parents, but just like young people, like a 15-year-old. What do you, how do you see them? What are you going to try to do to help them in their lives? So that will do, Nancy.
Sure, that's a great question. Well, I get to interact with 15-year-olds every day.
All right, sure.
And to be honest, they teach me a whole lot more than I think I teach them. And we don't talk politics in my class, of course, but I ask them to explain their opinions on things, explain how they feel about things. And I think that kind of dialogue is what we all need to be doing, whether it's with our own children, which I certainly did, but nieces, nephews, anytime we have kids that age in our atmosphere, we need to be talking to them about this because they care about it. I will say that. They are very tuned in. To be honest, I think the pandemic did a lot for kids to understand that they had a voice. And I think our schools can really give them a voice. But yeah, I love speaking to young people about this, and 15-year-olds can be a tough group, but they're giving me great practice, perhaps for the legislature. But yes, and I do think that we need to, when parents or aunts and uncles are voting, they need to talk to their kids about, this is the ballot, this is how I got it, you'll register when you're 18, and this is the process, because the more we can do that, the more involved they'll be. And I think involving schools in a nonpartisan way to be part of that process is always good. I mean, last year, my school, along with others, had a totally student-led walkout and it was on abortion rights. And I thought that was fabulous. I encouraged students to do what they thought was right during that time. And so I think they're going to lead us out of the kind of the dire straits that we're in. So they definitely are the future.
And Chris?
Yeah, and great answer, Nancy. I sign off on all of that good stuff that you were just talking about. And to the call of your question, Kurt, in looking at the data in the primary race that we just completed, and looking at the data on kind of who our target voter was, at least on the Democratic side, and then who voted, who wound up not just requesting the mail-in ballots, but turning them in and also voting same day and early. It was striking to see, to your point, the outsized percentage of folks who are 65 and older who voted in the primary. And again, nothing wrong with that. That's great. That's my, I'm an elder law and estate planning guy. I think that's great to have that involvement. But what's striking is how outsized that is. And I think it was something like, if you looked at voters 50 and older, it was like the lion's share of voters were 50 and older. So then you looked at those younger segments, and it was just a much smaller group. And so I think that we need to be trying to figure out everything we can possibly do to get younger voters engaged. And I think that as far as the agenda at the legislature goes, that it has to do with opportunity. And I think to the extent that younger people feel that we're doing things in the legislature that are going to benefit them and provide greater opportunity for them and for Arizona's future, I think that's got to be the best way from a subject matter perspective to get people engaged. Also, what Nancy said about just education, about the system, and just civics, basic civics, I think is really important. And the other thing is, our race, Nancy kind of won going away. I came in a distant second, but I was pretty close to the person who wound up coming in third, who's great, Kat Stratford. And Kat wasn't that, Nathan Davis, and Charlie Verdon in our primary also got a number of votes. And so, your vote really matters, because I think by margin, which I was watching closely up until yesterday, wound up being at 719 votes. And that's just, it's not that many votes. So I think sometimes people think of all ages that their votes don't matter. And boy, they certainly do. And so that's something that I think needs to be driven home.
All right. And we're going to wrap this up real quick here, but I want to add to this question. If you are an Arizona resident and you don't have parents who can pay for your college, you might end up going to a state school and graduating with student debt. And I would like to hear, do you think that's justified? And is there anything that any solution to that you could present? And I will do Chris again.
No, I don't. I think that one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about public education is because just picking one branch of my family, on my dad's side, my grandfather's family, they were from a small, tiny farming town in southern Illinois, Vienna, southern tip of Illinois, and there were 10 kids, and very not an affluent situation by any stretch. And 9 of those 10 kids were able to go to college, and a number of them to get advanced degrees through the University of Illinois and other land grant institutions. And I think when my grandfather, he still had to work while he was going to school, but his tuition for a semester was $50 at the University of Illinois. That's the idea. That's the concept of these land grant institutions, and the idea that people are coming out of a 4-year institution with a couple $100,000, $50,000, $100,000, whatever it is, $200,000 in debt is nuts. So I think we need to do whatever we can to focus on that, whether it's at the state or the federal level. And I think that would be a good use of some of the surplus funds that we talked about earlier.
I agree. I agree completely. And I'm currently paying in-state college tuition for my daughter. So both my daughters received academic scholarships, but there was still a huge chunk to help them pay. And my husband and I met at NAU. The GI Bill paid for his college, but it's not affordable for many of my students. They don't even think about college because they just think they don't just think it's out of reach. It is out of reach. I think our state constitution says that college should be as affordable as possible. I don't think that's true anymore. So yes, we need to put some of that surplus funding into our state colleges. And but we also need to, I just want to put a shout out to, not every student goes to college and not every student needs to go to college. There are wonderful trade unions that supplement education for students to be certified in all kinds of amazing things. And our public schools have CTE trainings and vocational trainings where students actually graduate high school with some sort of certification. So I think adding budget money to all of those things will help our students. And we absolutely need to look at that because, but I also think we could get our businesses involved in that as well. And, we have a lot of corporations in Arizona that come here because we give them extreme tax cuts, but they don't have a lot of stake in our community because they're not paying taxes. And I think we could do something with that to still incentivize them to come to Arizona, but to have them help us with funding. So, yep,
Okay.
It should be more affordable. I wish it was.
All right, so here's the final question that I always do in interviews is there anything that we didn't bring up that you think is important that needs to be talked about? We talked about a lot of stuff.
We did. I would just say that I'm running to serve, and I take it very seriously, and I appreciate the opportunities that I've had that have even led me along this path. So I knocked on a lot of doors, especially over summer when I wasn't teaching, and it was wonderful to get to meet my community. And I just appreciate everyone who voted for me in the primary, and I ask that they vote for both of us again in the general, and I will work to continue to knock on doors and be in the community and ask opinions. And Blog for Arizona already talked to me about having a newsletter on their site so that people could interact with me in that way. So I'll stop now, but thank you for this opportunity, and I really appreciate it.
Okay. And Chris?
Yes, and thank you very much, Kurt and Sarah and others, for this opportunity as well. So I would again sign off on everything that Nancy said. Just as far as the opportunity that we've had I think it's been a great experience for both of us to have been to run in the primary, to have had the voter conversations that we've had, to knock the doors that we've had. Something that I am hoping to, if I'm able to advance in November, bring to Southern Arizona is a little bit of experience, just because something that, I guess, a couple things that I'd like to note. One, so we've current representative from LD9, Pam Powers Hanley, is stepping down. As I mentioned earlier, I took Randy Freese's slot. Domingo de Grazia from a neighboring district is also retiring. Victoria Steele is going to be Justice of the Peace. So we really, it's useful, I think, to have some experience. And even though I've only had a session of experience, it does, there are a lot of getting to know the personalities, getting to know the procedure does take some time, and there's a steep learning curve, but people do it every day. I did it. Nancy will be able to do it great. So that's something is just the what I hope I can bring to the table is that experience that I've had and the other experiences that I've had prior to that. The other thing is the importance of these statewide races, and Nancy alluded to this a little bit, but who is governor? The difference between a Governor Katie Hobbs and a Governor Kerry Lake, just for the state and for the country, is going to be a really big deal. But boy, in the legislature, it would sure be a huge deal. If we had, as folks did when Jen Napolitano was governor, we had a Governor Katie Hobbs, a Democratic governor, so many of these bills, I think all of these bills that we talked about, the bad ones, would get vetoed, and there wouldn't be a veto-proof majority. We wouldn't be able to override those vetoes. So that's a huge deal. So I think it's important for folks to focus on the state ledge races, but boy, the statewide races with Katie Hobbs, with the Secretary of State's race is a huge one. With my current colleague, Mr. Fincham, is running on the Republican side there, and Chris Mays and all of the rest. So important, and it's important for people to focus on that. I think Nancy and I are going to be trying to do whatever we can do in addition to helping our own races to help those folks win.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, we had an hour-long discussion here. So I hope that we'll post this online, and I hope people watch it and they'll get a better sense of who you are and what you want to do. And to the people who showed up, I don't know how many showed up throughout the entire day, but I very much appreciate you being here. And with that, we will end it. So thank you so much for showing up. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
Have a good one, everybody.